Me being a person that's a family man, if I'm interacting with a police officer, I put my pride aside. It's like, yo, I got to get home to my family. I got to get home to my kids. Me sitting up here going back and forth with this officer, at the end of the day, he has his mindset, you're getting arrested. My fight now turns to the court system.
It's a matter of opinion. If I'm right, but I'm leaving no for now to go outside, putting shores and obligations on our part.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Matter of Opinion. I'm your boy Walls P.
I'm your girl, Erica.
On today's episode, we break everything down on the Tyre Nichols case. Now, for those of you who are unaware, February 1st, 2023 was the funeral of Tyre Nichols. Now, for his funeral, there was a pretty big gathering. You had people like Reverend Al Sharpton there, you had Ben Crump there, pretty much a lot of people there to pay their dues and pay their respect to Tyre Nichols. Now, for those who don't know, or for those who didn't see the video footage of what happened on January 7th, Tyre Nichols was pulled over for what police say was reckless driving. Now, immediately when they pulled him over, they jumped out the vehicle barking commands. They didn't ask to see his registration, the man's license, or anything. They immediately pulled him out. Now, in the initial report, it says that 5 officers were responsible for the death of Tyre Nichols. But as more information came out, we came to understand that it was way more than 5 officers that played an intricate role on taking this man's life. Now, another thing I want to point out is those 5 officers that were on video beating this man, they were part of the Scorpion unit in Memphis. And that Scorpion unit is Street Crimes Operation to Restore Peace in Our Neighbors. So these officers should have been trained on de-escalation. But ladies and gentlemen, that is not what happened. So when they pulled them over, they rushed to the scene, don't ask them for any information, no identification, anything, just start barking commands. It's being reported that 71 commands were basically said to Tyre Nichols. And it's also reported that it was damn near impossible for him to respond to all 71 commands. Now, with that being said, they attacked this man and they tased him. Being scared for his life, he eventually broke free and ran. They chased him down, caught him again, and that's when they began to pummel him, beat him. One officer, it looked like he was setting up for a field goal kick where he kicked him in the face 2 or 3 times while he was handcuffed. Now, eventually, they stood him up, and again, the man was handcuffed, and an officer pursued to punch him like 3 or 4 times in the face, which then Tyre Nichols collapsed to the floor. They dragged his limp body into a police vehicle and basically left him there.
After all of that being said, the EMTs took their time getting to the scene. They also took their time getting off of the scene while taking Tyre Nichols to the hospital. These are all things that can factor into the play of him succumbing to his injuries. One, we don't know what all information was given to the medical staff once he got to the hospital. So they may not have been able to treat all of his injuries correctly with information being omitted out, especially with the way that things are starting to come out to light that their report may have been partially falsified. And with the video surveillance, you're seeing where he's getting kicked in the face, hit with batons, pepper sprayed. Who knows if they even told the hospital all of this transpired when they got there.
So the 5 officers that are currently being charged from left to right: Justin Smith, Emmett Martin, Desmond Mills Jr., Demetrius Haley, Tadarius Bean.
The 5 police officers are being charged with 2 counts of official misconduct, 1 count of official oppression, 1 count of aggravated assault, and 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping. Memphis Fire Department has now fired 2 EMTs and a lieutenant, claiming that they violated numerous policies and protocols when they were called to the scene of Tyre Nichols' arrest after he was beaten and pepper sprayed.
Now, there's 2 things that I want to point out in this case. 1, the chief of the police department, and 2, another officer that wasn't immediately in the report. After people online did their investigation, they later pointed out who this officer was, and that's when this officer's name mysteriously showed up in the affidavit and in the reports. That officer, ladies and gentlemen, is Preston Hemphill. Now, the way that everybody depicted that Preston Hemphill was the person in the video is because of this image right here. This is a still image from the body-worn camera from Officer Preston as he was tasing Tyre Nichols. Now, people took to the web and matched the watch band that he was wearing with this image right here. The two bands pretty much match. Now, one thing to point out was he was not fired, but he's under investigation and has been relieved of his duties. Now, this is the statement that they said. They said the Memphis Police Department began administrative investigations on officers involved in the death of Tyre Nichols January 7th, 2023. On January 8th, 2023, 7 officers, including Officer Preston Hemphill, were relieved of duty. Officer Hemphill's actions and involvement has been under investigation as he participated in the initial traffic stop and use of a taser. The 5 officers terminated were directly involved at the first and second scene where Mr. Nichols was physically abused and suffered serious injuries. The MPD's team of internal affairs investigators prioritized interviewing officers and witnesses related to the second scene first, where the most egregious aspects of the incident occurred. Officer Preston Hemphill's and other officers' actions and interactions has been and continue to be subject of this investigation since its inception of January 8th, 2023. The department's internal affairs unit capacity to thoroughly interview more than 30 internal and external parties simultaneously was completed in record time. There are numerous charges still developing that are impending. As stated in earlier updates, the Memphis Police Department remains committed to transparency in this tragedy. However, we must ensure a complete and thorough investigation of all officers is conducted. In the interest of community trust, the department has worked nonstop to that end to ensure the appropriate disciplinary actions are taken. We expect the next phase of personal actions in the coming days.
So, in layman's term, he was not arrested with the other officers because utilizing the taser was not egregious. He did in the video inform him if he did not stop resisting arrest, stop moving, didn't lay flat, then he would utilize the taser. So, because he was instructed with commands and did not follow the commands that the officer was given, then that's when he administered the taser itself.
Now, one thing I also want to point out, if you saw that video, he also, once Tyre took running, he was stated on camera saying, "I hope they stomp him," which to me basically paints a narrative that this is something that they've done before. Because why would you automatically say you want somebody to be stomped? The only way you come to that conclusion is if this happened before, where a person tried to run, they captured him, and they began to stomp and pummel him. That's why I think he said what he said. Now, let's talk about this police chief. This police chief, Sarah Lynn C.J. Davis, I think I'm pronouncing her name right. Right here in this article in the New York Post, it says the chief of police in Memphis, in charge of the 5 officers who fatally beat and tasered motorist Tyre Nichols, was fired from a previous law enforcement job after a botched probe. Ladies and gentlemen, this gets interesting. CJ Davis became the first female police chief in Memphis history in 2001 and is currently in the international spotlight after 5 cops brutally beat Tyre Nichols. She was fired from the Atlanta Police Department in 2008 for her alleged investigation in an ex-crimes investigation into the husband of an Atlanta police sergeant, according to Atlanta Journal-Constitution. 2 detectives accused Davis of telling them not to investigate Terrell Marion Crane, who was married to Sergeant Tanya Crane, after the police department obtained photos of him with underage girls. A federal grand jury later indicted Terrell Crane on child pornography. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of child pornography in 2009, the newspaper reported. The indictment was issued after Atlanta police took action in the case, and a subsequent investigation by the city pointed to Davis as the reason. Davis was demoted from major to lieutenant before being fired from the force that she had joined in 2008. Now that we got the in-depth of the police chief, Erica P., break down the histories of these police officers.
So 4 out of the 5 officers were either reprimanded or suspended for failure to report when they were either using physicality, failed to report alleged domestic violence, or for damages sustained to their squad cruisers at one point in time or another. So to me, that means there is a history of some of these officers not doing what they should be doing or following their process and procedures. So, in layman's terms, these might have been some problem officers and people had just been sweeping this stuff under the rug.
Now, here's another thing I want to point out, and you could correct me if I'm wrong on this. The Scorpion unit is designed to basically bring peace to the community. How do these officers qualify for such a unit to have a checkered past? If anything, wouldn't you want to hire people who don't have a blemish record so that they can practice in de-escalating and actually bridging that gap between relations between police officers and the people that they're in the community that they're supposed to serve and protect?
Yeah, that's weird. I You're right. I do feel like the unit that they're in, it should be to help protect that community. It's for you to start blending in with that community. It's for the officers to be seen by other people in the community as a non-threat. The only problem is when you utilize some of these special teams, you also have to see what they're specializing in. The problem is this was a 30-person specialized team and they considered themselves one of the hotspot policing units. So that means this is where you had to deal with a lot of serious crimes. This is where this was a neighborhood that had higher crime rates than most. But because they were dealing with those kind of things, after all of this stuff transpired, it's actually been disbanded. You had to. If you have 5 out of your 30 team all just got fired for unexplainable reasons that were so egregious, you have to look at the team itself. You have to look at who's running this team. You have to look at what has this team been doing, because I almost feel like this particular team has been maybe a cowboy type effort or a rogue type of unit, because if something this egregious is happening, that means there's no checks and balance system. There's
Let me
nobody.
let me let me because I know you're trying to be generous with your word placement. Let me say it for you. It seemed like this team was a bunch of criminals basically that were band together and had a license to do whatever it is that they want to do in the street. The reason why I say this is because when Officer Preston said what he said on camera, that lets you know this is something that they done before. And when you look at the video with the body cam, there were moments where it was covered. They were covering the body cam and all this other stuff. Thank God there was a security camera on the corner that caught everything. So they were acting as though, hey, this badge, we got a license to do whatever it is that we want to do. We're able to hide what we're doing, and they're going to take our word for it, and we'll get away with it. And like you said, they had checkered past previously, including the chief herself. The way I look at it, they band together a bunch of thugs that thought they had a license to do whatever it is that they want to do.
The way you just broke that down, it's a fair point for me. I understand where you're coming from, and I can see why this particular unit is disbanded now.
One thing that I want to speak about is swift actions were taken on these officers. Never have we seen officers been fired this quickly and criminal charges were put placed against them. This is the quickest that I've seen that I can remember. Can you recall any time that charges were brought on police and they were fired this quickly?
Never this quick.
No?
Most of the
Okay.
times, they're dragging their feet on putting
Exactly.
charges.
Exactly. Another thing too, that I want to address with this too is a tweet that LeBron James said when it came to everything with Tyre Nichols. Apparently, LeBron James is coming under fire for a tweet that he said in response to the death of Tyre Nichols. What he said in his tweet was, "We are our own worst enemy." And when he was saying that, he was referencing the officers being black. So people responded by saying he never moved past page 6 in Malcolm X's book. Another wrote, "You're talking about the Lakers because if you're talking about this current situation, bruh, nah, wrong time." He then later on went to tweet, "What's really clear about some of the reaction to the murder of hashtag Tyre Nichols is that We fail to fully understand race and its construction as a systemic tool. The entire system of policing sees the black body as a problem, no matter who pulls the trigger. Here's what I want to say about that. He wasn't wrong about saying we are our own worst enemy. Because at the end of the day, that's how I view it. We are our worst enemy. If you look at the rate of black on black crime and blacks killing each other year over year, the number is by the thousands. That's astronomically high. And people giving them pushback to me just says we don't want to face the truth and a sad reality that we are a detriment to ourselves. What do you think on that?
I'm with you on that. I do. I feel like we as a people have to do better. If we don't do better, how are we going to expect outsiders or other people to want to do better? We have to educate ourselves and make sure that we clean up our areas. Make sure that we're not the ones causing the detriment for ourselves. One. Two, we want the police in our area to do better, but guess what? Our police aren't going to do better if they're not looking at themselves as being one of us. Unfortunately, most of the policing that's happening, and we're seeing the stories about them, these are people that think they're above the people that they're stopping. These are people that think they're above their neighborhoods. And to be honest, no, we are all the same people, regardless. When we get stopped, they're going to look at you as a black person, if you're in your uniform or if you're not. So for me, I do need you to look at us as the same. We don't know if this stop was justified or not. This person could have not did anything at all, but stopped him as if he was one of the worst criminals. The police officers that stopped him with the weapon, and they were going in for the kill.
I just want to interject here. And here's where I'm going with this. And you can chime in whenever you want to chime in. The family asked for a peaceful protest.
We want peace. We do not want any type of uproar. We do not want any type of disturbance. We want peaceful protests. That's what the family wants. That's what the community wants. Please, please, protest, but protest safely.
So the family asked for peaceful protesting, and that's not what we see going on in all these protests. So that's a bad optic right there. During Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, they had a car show or something like that for Martin Luther King. I forgot what town it was in. Do you know people got injured because of a shooting
I could
at
believe
this
it.
thing? So you can't put aside your anger, your hate, or your beef, whatever it is that you have with an individual for something that we're trying to commemorate, a historical figure that made change for equality in the whole nine, and we still act out. That's why I'm saying, is LeBron James wrong for what he said? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you're saying, hey, we got to like Tyre Nichols, they viewed him as, you know, a thug or whatever the case may be. It's because in the black community, we indoctrinate bad behavior. It's like the worse you are as a criminal and you're a rapper, the more record sales you're gonna get, the more street credibility you're gonna get. We adopted a whole snitching culture, and most of these people don't even live in that type of lifestyle. And freaking they're saying, oh, don't snitch, don't be a snitch. This is why when you see white people who are attacked or whatever by police officers, there is no protest because they know if this person did XYZ, they were the worst of the worst or whatever the case may be. But meanwhile, we'll sit here, protest, and defend criminals left to right. Now, I'm not saying Tyre Nichols is a criminal, but what I'm saying is when you see all these things, it make outsiders look at the black community as we glorify bad behavior. So if that's what's being like that's how it looks optically on the outside looking in, of course it's going to get people to think one way about us. If I'm walking down the street and I see a group of cops chilling on the corner or whatever, I'm not going to be afraid to walk past them. But if I see a group of brothers with their pants sagging, chilling on the corner in groups, I'm walking across the street or I'm gonna go another direction. I'm more fearful of that group than I am if I see a group of police just hanging out, chilling somewhere. What is your take?
I get it. I do. I really do. But guess what? We can't preach we want change if we're not the ones changing. And I think that's the problem. We want to hold everybody else accountable for them to change, but we as a people are not changing ourselves. Until we change those stereotypes and we change the rhetoric and we change what's being reported in the news every day, guess what? Nobody else is going to change their reactions and interactions with us. So we have to do better for other people to start doing better towards us as well.
I'm a black man and I love my black and brown people. But we have a thought process where no matter what, through thick and thin, you're supposed to support a person just because they're black, good or bad. And to me, that doesn't fly. The thing that you said is we want other people to change, but we're not going to change. Here's something that I want you guys to look in a dynamic. Slavery happened over 400 years ago. You had white people owning slaves. They basically got in on the slave trade because that slave trade was going on before white people in America started getting slaves. Africans were part of the slave trade. Europeans were part of the slave trade. Pretty much slavery was in existence. Blacks owned black slaves. They bought slaves and pretty much slaves were their property. I'm not talking about it being right or wrong. I'm just pointing a picture for everybody. When you buy a pet or something, right? That pet dog, you look at it as I'm superior to you. I'm not going to buy a dog and say this dog is superior to me or this cat is superior to me. So they're buying slaves and they're looking at it as, hey, I'm superior than these slaves, these group of people that we're purchasing and is my property. Fast forward to now. Whenever we see somebody who has the mindset of back in the days with slavery and stuff, how they have a superiority complex and everything like that, what do we say? Oh, you should educate yourself and not be like that. This is a different time, right? That's what we say.
Correct.
Now, when black people act out, they chuck it up to slavery starts like this dates back this is dated back to slavery. Slavery is why we're in the predicament that we're in. Well, they one can turn around and say, well, you should have educated yourself from that time. If you're saying white people have to educate themselves from that time because it's showing its ugly head time by time, then one can turn around and say to black people, yo, you're acting up. Slavery happened over 400 years ago. You should be able to educate yourself. I'm just painting a dynamic on how what you say to these group of people can also be said to us. Am I wrong for thinking that way?
You're not wrong for thinking that way. But the problem is everybody else has to start thinking. You want equal representation. You want to be treated fairly. You want policing to change some of their policies. But when it's the police that look like you or doing the same thing, how do you change it? You can't. Because guess what? They're in a position to make changes or talk to their union reps to get some changes put into play or talk to their captains and their lieutenants to say, hey, these are the common things that we see going on the streets. We need help. We need different representation. We need protocols that protect them. And guess what? You won't get this kind of stuff if you're not talking about it. You won't get that kind of stuff if you're not making better decisions and better choices when you're in that field of work. You don't make any changes if you're not electing the people that are going to vote for the acts to happen. Did I didn't even know. I was doing some other research and looked at the George after the George Floyd death, there were acts that they was trying to put in place in 2000. Guess what? It passed the House, but it never passed the Senate. And then now it's been shelved for over 17 months. How are you supposed to make changes if the acts are not being passed? So unfortunately to me, I feel like more needs to be done all the way around. Officers
But
need to do better. Either it be black, brown, white, yellow, it doesn't matter. I feel like people are people and they have to start treating people equally when it comes to policing. I also feel like there needs to be more protections. I feel like every other group has protections. So why is black people not getting protections? If they're the ones that's getting the worst ends of these videos that are circulating. Every few weeks, something else pops up. I like the fact that the videos are coming out to light because we could see what's going on around the world. But I also am disheartened when I see these videos all the time. It's something that I don't ever want to have to, I don't want to keep seeing it. I don't want my kids to have to see this stuff.
the thing about this is that these were black cops that did this to a black individual. So it still comes down to what LeBron James said: we're a detriment to ourselves. And if we want change to actually happen, we can't rely on lawmakers and stuff like this. It starts in the community. That's what it starts at. So if the community and black people actually stuck together, so to speak, and actually try and uplift one another, yeah, these cops would have had a different approach when they approached, Tyree. But we're so segregated that we view each other as enemies as opposed to actual brothers and sisters. With that being said, let's hear what the family of Tyre Nichols had to say on the matter.
Joining us now from Memphis are Tyre's mother, Rovon Wells, his stepfather, Rodney Wells, and the family's attorney, Ben Crump. Attorney Crump, I want to start with you. Describe what you make of the video.
As I said, the video is going to remind a lot of people of Rodney King, but as America watched this video, everybody has concluded it's much worse. It is appalling, deplorable, heinous, and you can go all the way through the alphabet, but you get to the end and everybody concludes it is so unnecessary how Tyre Nichols was killed. He never should have been killed in this manner.
Now, one thing to point out on how serious and egregious this attack was, you have a lot of medical professionals actually coming out saying that watching this video can cause mental health issues or racial trauma. That's one thing to definitely take into consideration on how savage and how brutal this beating was.
And you say so much worse because, of course, he did die days later. Mrs. Wells, I want to bring you in and just express our condolences to you and your family. Thank you for being with us. I know as of last night you said that you hadn't watched the video. How difficult was it to learn that your son was calling out for you?
It was very difficult. As a mother, you want to always be there when your children need you. So when I heard that my son was calling my name and I wasn't there for him, that just hurt my heart.
Mrs. Wells, as a mother, my heart absolutely breaks for you. Can you tell us, how do you feel about the charges against those 5 officers, the fact that they have been charged relatively quickly in this case?
After the charges were explained to me, I'm actually okay with the charges. The district attorney and the chief of police has done an excellent job in getting this done quickly and swiftly, and we still have more to do.
Mr. Wells, what do you think of the other first responders who were there, the sheriff's deputies who have since been relieved of duty? Do you think that there are others who should also be charged?
Most definitely. It looks as though it may be maybe 5, 6 other police officers that should be charged in this case. There was also at the initial encounter with my son, there was a white officer that was tasing my son, and we don't understand how come his name was not put out there or mentioned in this whole fiasco. So yes, I think that there should be quite a few additional charges.
And Mr. Wells, you know, watching that video, as difficult as it is, there's a point where they say that Tyre reached for an officer's gun, that he had his hand on an officer's gun. And now that there are questions about the nature of that stop, whether there was any reckless driving to initiate it, what do you make of what was happening?
I want to chime in on this because even if, let's just say for the sake of argument, he did reach for the gun, the man is basically getting his life stripped away from him blow by blow, punch by punch, baton swing by baton swing, kick by kick. So at this point, you're kind of in a mind where you're in self defense, where whatever it is you could do to protect yourself or save your life, you're going to go for it. Because at this point, what do you have to lose? I looked at the video. I didn't see any time that he reached for the gun, but in those blind spots, who knows? But even if he did, could you blame him?
I can't blame him at that point because at what point is somebody going to step in and stop it? At what point is enough enough? And I think that's what's disheartening more than anything else. You screamed 71 different commands. How are you expecting him to pay attention? You're beating him. He's fearful for his life at this point. He
And
ran.
pepper spraying him. And
You
pepper
pepper
spray.
sprayed him. You tased him. Like, what else are you doing? This is a person who is less than 150 pounds soaking wet. How much do
Yeah,
you really think the body can take?
agreed. So if they were trying to use that as an argument, that's a bad argument. It doesn't work for me. The math ain't mathing.
Even if he did try to grab the gun, guess what? If he grabbed the gun, then you would have pulled your gun out if he would have really got a hold of it. And
And
obviously
what?
he
Yeah,
didn't. And it would have been a
and one of
different dynamic.
them would have said, "Gun, he's got my gun" or something. Nobody said nothing. So it's kind of reaching for straws as an excuse to justify your actions. Let's continue.
With the officers at the time of that video?
Well, anybody who watched the video know that Tyree did not reach for an officer's gun. He was just trying to cover his tail. And if you know Tyree, like we know Tyree, he would have never, ever tried to reach for an officer's gun. That doesn't even make common sense.
And Mr. Crump, I want to bring you back in really quickly. These officers, all 5 of them, they are black. And you have said that this shows that police violence isn't about an officer being black or white. It is about blue. And you say that it shows that this is systemic.
Absolutely. It's institutionalized police culture that continues to have implicit bias, whether the officer's black, Hispanic, or white, where the excessive force continues to be exerted against black people and brown people. We don't see our white brothers and sisters who are unarmed brutalized like this by police. And we have to finally get police reform, as Rovon continues to pray, like so many other parents and mothers especially.
Absolutely.
That last part that he said definitely sticks out to me, where it makes me question why that bill after George Floyd passing didn't get passed through the Senate, where if a police officer basically has like a ding on their record, it follows them everywhere and people could find it, easily. So this way, if they go for another job, hey, it shows up on your record as far as like, the hiring process goes. Because what do we see? We see a lot of these officers that commit crimes or whatever, and it is a crime no matter how you slice it. It's just you're under the badge and you get a lighter punishment, whereas you should be held on a higher standard. What do? They leave, they quit, go to another precinct. Their record is basically wiped clean. We always see that happen. And whenever something happens, whether it's a shooting or whatever the case may be, they'll always put the perp's criminal record up front and center, but they never do that for the police officer. They keep it hidden until people actually start doing more and more digging to get this information out. And it's like, this person had a shooting or some type of abuse couple months ago or a year ago, and it be multiple incidents. And it's like, yo, how does this person still have a badge? I always say culture will always usurp policy. You can have all the policies that you want in place, but if the culture is not abiding by those policies, the policies mean nothing, you know? So they need to get things in order as far as the policing in America. Cops with checkered past should not have a badge. And they should do something else where they do every 6 months, because they're funding the police system and everything like that, right? So if you're funding the police, how about you have um psych evaluations every 6 months to determine if these officers are fit to be officers, you know? What's wrong with that?
That's a little
But
different.
yeah,
It gives them a different mindset because think about it. Sometimes you have officers who see the worst of the worst. Maybe they need to go to some kind of counseling because every circumstance is not the same. Think about it. You get people who'll be in the same job for years and it just start merging together. Like, well, this it's another one of them kind of calls. It's another. So when you start thinking that kind of mindset, then you're going to treat everybody the same way. Maybe they don't know how to turn that switch off sometimes. So maybe they do need to seek some kind of help or go through the evaluations just to make sure that they're coping correctly. So you get the
I
best
agree.
version of them and they could do their job effectively.
Now, the last thing I want to say before we wrap this video up is, if there's anything we need to learn from this video, is why complying is so important. People can look at this and just be like, hey, he was defending himself and everything like that. But when you look at the video, when they initially pulled him out the vehicle, yes, he was saying, all right, and everything like that. But then when they went to put him to the ground, put your hands behind your back and everything, if you look carefully, he still was not fully giving his arms to the police officers. That's why complying is very important. I understand. Look, I got a problem with authority. I hate people telling me what to do and stuff like this. And I'm sure everybody have that issue. And everybody's like, hey, I have my rights, yada yada. But at the end of the day, you don't know what kind of mindset that officer's in. And as you see, these officers, whatever the day was, whatever happened in their day, they had some bad tendencies in their mind. And we don't know if they would have put the handcuffs on him, would this had happened or not. We don't know that. But I feel if there wasn't a struggle to put the hands behind his back, like instantly lay down flat and answer to them commands, I don't think they would have been as mad and irate and as thirsty to basically attack him. Because once the chasing and stuff started happening, that's when it seemed like that pushed the officers over the edge. And they was like, yo, we're in full on attack mode. Because they wasn't really attacking them with the initial, when they initially got him and pulled him out the car. Yeah, they dragged him out the car, they tased him and stuff like that. But there wasn't punches and stuff being thrown until after they chased him and caught him. So my mindset is, if he would have just, hey, put his hands behind his back and everything like that, I think the outcome could have been different. So those who say, oh, don't comply, to me, I feel you're doing a disservice by not complying. And guess what? You comply, you had your rights stripped from you, and you weren't supposed to be detained, or whatever the case may be. You do a lawsuit, you get compensated for it. You fill out paperwork to try and get these officers fired. At the end of the day, you will be taken care of in one way or another. And me being a person that's a family man, if I'm interacting with a police officer, I put my pride aside. It's like, yo, I got to get home to my family. I got to get home to my kids. Me sitting up here going back and forth with this officer, at the end of the day, he has his mindset, you're getting arrested. My fight now turns to the court system. That's who I got to make my case to. Me going back and forth with the police officer is doing absolutely nothing whatsoever. The minute they have in your mind, you're getting arrested, we're slapping these handcuffs on you, your fight now is to get a lawyer, go in that courtroom, and plead your case. So I hope we learn that complying is very important when it comes to interacting with a police officer.
You took the words right out of my mouth. There's nothing else for me to say here.
With that being said, that's all the information and the breakdown and our analysis that we have on the Tyre Nichols situation. Sad, unfortunate killing of this young man. The family also have a GoFundMe. If you would like to support, the link will be in the description. There's the GoFundMe for Tyre Nichols. If you can, whether it's $1, $2, show your support. With that being said, let us know what you guys think in the comment section. We would love to hear your take. With that being said, if this is your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button and clicking that notification bell so that you could be notified for more content like this. If you want to follow us on our other social media platforms, the links are in the description. Like this video, share this video, comment on this video. I'm your boy, Walls P.
I'm your girl, Erica.
And we will catch you, ladies and gentlemen, on the next episode. Peace.
Peace.
It's a matter of opinion.